Lionel Richie canceled his concert in Chicago tonight at the United Center after an onstage health scare during Wednesday night show in Minnesota.
Now we're hearing from fans who are worried about the Grammy winner's health.
He built 40 years of a career on the promise that the party would never stop, that the band would play all night long, that he would always be the one still standing when the lights came up. So when a 77-year-old Lionel Richie suddenly had to sit down in the middle of one of his most energetic songs, told a stunned crowd he felt dizzy and strange, and vanished backstage into an ambulance, fans everywhere started asking the same question. Was this just a scary but ordinary moment for a touring performer in his 70s, or was Lionel Richie quietly dealing with something much bigger that he wasn't ready to share? 10 days of near-total silence followed. And when he finally spoke, what he chose to say, and more importantly, what he chose not to say, left almost as many questions open as it answered. To understand why this moment hit so hard, you have to understand what kind of performer Lionel Richie has always been. This is a man who has spent decades as one of the most reliable, most joyful presences in music, someone whose shows are built around warmth, nostalgia, and an almost effortless command of the stage. So when the opening night of his new tour with Earth, Wind and Fire turned into a medical emergency, it did not just surprise fans. It rattled them, because it did not fit the version of Lionel Richie they thought they knew. The tour kicked off on June 24th at the Grand Casino Arena in St. Paul, Minnesota, and by every account, the night started exactly the way everyone hoped it would. Just hours before showtime, Richie had posted on social media, clearly excited, sharing photos from rehearsals and soundcheck and telling his fans that St. Paul was about to get a show. For roughly the first hour, that is exactly what happened. The crowd was singing, Earth, Wind and Fire brought their usual high-energy set, and Richie worked the stage the way he always has. Then came Dancing on the Ceiling, a song that is fast, upbeat, and normally one of the most physically active moments of his entire set. According to multiple people in the audience that night, something shifted almost immediately. Richie stopped moving the way he normally would and instead sat down on one of the stage platforms, something witnesses say had reportedly never happened during that particular song in the entire history of him performing it live. He did not try to hide what was happening either. In front of thousands of people, he told the crowd plainly that he was feeling dizzy and strange, and that when that happens on stage, the only smart move is to sit down. For a moment, it almost played like classic Richie humor, a seasoned performer making light of an awkward situation. He even joked to the crowd that it was the first time he had ever performed that particular song sitting down, and called it a bad sign. The crowd laughed along with him in real time, the way audiences often do when a beloved performer turns a stumble into a punchline. But as the song continued and he stayed seated, the mood in that arena started to change. People who had been laughing moments earlier began exchanging glances. Phones came out. Conversations shifted from excitement to concern, because watching a man known for gliding effortlessly across a stage suddenly need to sit down did not feel like part of the show anymore. It felt like something was genuinely wrong. From there, Richie moved to the piano and delivered a seated performance of 3 Times a Lady, and then he stepped away from the stage entirely. Most fans assumed it was simply an unplanned intermission, a short pause before the show picked back up. What they did not know at the time was that, behind the scenes, paramedics were already being called in. According to reporting from the Minnesota Star-Tribune, the crowd waited roughly 40 additional minutes without any real explanation. During that stretch of uncertainty, Earth, Wind and Fire saxophonist Dino Soldo eventually walked out to address the audience directly, letting them know that Richie was not feeling well and would not be able to continue the show that night. What had been planned as a full 90-minute concert ended after less than an hour. Behind the curtain, things were moving quickly. Paramedics reportedly met Richie once he left the stage, and he was taken by ambulance to a nearby hospital. The St. Paul Fire Department later confirmed to Fox News Digital that an adult man had been transported from the arena that night to a local hospital by Fire Department EMS, though officials did not release his name or any specific medical details. Sources close to Rich's camp, cited by outlets including TMZ, described the hospital visit as a precautionary measure, language that told fans very little about what had actually caused the episode but at least suggested it was not being treated as a life-threatening emergency. That single word, precautionary, became one of the only concrete details anyone had to hold on to in those first chaotic hours. Everything else was left open, and in the absence of real information, speculation online started to build almost immediately. But it's worth being careful here and sticking only to what has actually been confirmed by credible outlets, rather than repeating whatever theory happens to be trending in a comment section. What we do know, based on reporting from Fox News Digital, TMZ, the Minnesota Star-Tribune, and other outlets that covered the story as it unfolded, is that Richie told the audience he felt dizzy and strange, that he was hospitalized overnight as a precaution, and that his tour was immediately disrupted as a direct result. What has never been confirmed, by Richie himself, by his representatives, or by any hospital official, is an exact medical diagnosis. That distinction did not stop the tour from being paused almost immediately. Richie's team announced that 2 upcoming shows, one at the United Center in Chicago and another at the Scottenstein Center in Columbus, Ohio, were being postponed on doctor's orders so that he could rest and recover. The United Center's own announcement noted that Richie was heartbroken about postponing those dates and eager to get back to performing for his fans, while the tour was expected to resume just days later in Pittsburgh. It is worth pausing on what a decision like that actually involves. Postponing 2 full arena shows is not a small or symbolic gesture. It means refunding or rescheduling tickets for thousands of people, coordinating with 2 separate venues in 2 separate cities, and pulling an entire touring production off the road on short notice. That is not the kind of call a team makes over a minor stumble. It's the kind of call that typically only happens when a doctor is the one giving the instructions. The official statement from Rich's team was brief and polite, offering an apology to fans holding tickets for those 2 shows and promising that rescheduled dates would be announced soon. There was no mention of a diagnosis, no mention of test results, just an apology and a promise that both the tour and Richie himself would be back. So the shows were cancelled, the singer had spent a night in the hospital, and fans were left waiting for more information that, for the moment, was not coming. In the days that followed, one explanation started circulating that a lot of people latched onto as the likely answer. Earth, Wind and Fire's drummer, John Paris, spoke with the Minnesota Star-Tribune and said that Richie had shown no signs of illness before the show that night. According to Paris, Richie later told him that he had simply felt a little dehydrated. On its own, that explanation makes a lot of sense. Dehydration is an extremely common issue for touring performers, especially those in their 70s working under hot stage lights night after night, and it can easily produce symptoms like dizziness and the need to sit down. But there is an important distinction that gets lost when a secondhand comment like that spreads online as if it were an official medical statement. That explanation did not come from Lionel Richie speaking publicly about his own health. It came from a bandmate, relaying what he says Richie told him in a private conversation. That is not nothing, and there is no obvious reason to think Paris was misrepresenting what Richie shared with him, but it is also simply not the same thing as Richie himself going on the record. As of the most recent reporting available, Richie has never personally confirmed dehydration, or any other specific medical explanation, as the actual cause of what happened on that stage in St. Paul. Multiple entertainment outlets covering the story have explicitly pointed out that Richie has not detailed what caused his hospitalization in his own words. It also raises a fair question worth asking out loud. If dehydration really was the full and simple explanation the whole time, why did it take 10 full days of near total silence before Richie addressed his own fans directly, in his own words? A straightforward case of dehydration is usually not the kind of thing that requires more than a week of careful, measured silence from an artist's own social media accounts. That gap between a bandmate's secondhand comment and Rich's own extended silence created exactly the kind of vacuum that online speculation tends to fill. Fan forums and comment sections buzzed with theories ranging from simple exhaustion after decades of non-stop touring, to more serious concerns tied to his age, to questions about whether the physical demands of performing night after night were finally starting to catch up with him. None of those theories had any real reporting behind them. They were guesses, filling space that Rich's own team had left open. And this is a pattern fans have seen before with other legendary performers well into their 70s and beyond, a frightening moment on stage, a vague secondhand explanation, and then a stretch of guessing games before the artist addresses it directly, if they ever choose to at all. While Richie stayed quiet publicly, he did not stay off the road for long. On June 30th, just 6 days after being rushed to the hospital in Minnesota, he returned to the stage to perform in Pittsburgh at PPG Paints Arena, resuming the tour with Earth, Wind and Fire almost exactly on the original postponed schedule. For an artist who had just gone through a very public health scare in front of thousands of witnesses and countless more watching video clips online, getting back on stage that quickly sent its own message, even without a formal statement attached to it. From there, the tour continued into Detroit as well, with Richie apparently picking up right where he had left off before the scare in St. Paul. But through all of that, he still had not spoken directly to his fans about what had actually happened. That finally changed on July 4th, exactly 10 days after his hospitalization. Richie shared a message on social media that was warm, grateful, and almost entirely focused on his fans rather than his own medical situation. He thanked people for their messages and their concern, said he was doing well and felt grateful for the support, and then reflected on his recent shows in Pittsburgh and Detroit, calling them genuinely joyful nights filled with energy, dancing, and real memories with the crowd. He closed by telling fans he would see them at his upcoming stop in Toronto. It is worth paying close attention to what that statement actually contains, because what it leaves out matters just as much. Richie confirmed that he was recovering well. He confirmed that he was grateful for the outpouring of support from fans. He confirmed that he was back on stage and back on tour. What he did not do anywhere in that message was name an actual diagnosis. He did not confirm dehydration as the cause. He did not confirm any underlying condition. He did not use the kind of blanket reassurance some celebrities reach for when they want to shut a health story down completely. Instead, he offered gratitude, and he offered proof that he was back doing what he loves, joking on stage about the very moment that had sent him to the hospital in the first place, without ever fully explaining what that moment actually was. So does a warm, grateful message that never mentions a specific medical cause really count as him finally addressing what happened? Based on everything reported so far by credible outlets covering this story, there is no confirmation that Lionel Richie has revealed some previously hidden diagnosis, and no evidence that he was concealing a serious illness that he has now admitted to publicly. What the verified reporting actually shows is more restrained than that. Richie felt dizzy and strange during a concert. He was taken to the hospital as a precaution. He postponed 2 shows on doctor's orders. A bandmate said Richie described feeling dehydrated, though Richie himself has never personally confirmed that as the cause. And 10 days later, Richie thanked his fans and confirmed he was doing well and back on tour, without naming any specific medical explanation. That is the difference between the version of this story that spreads fastest online and the version that is actually backed by reporting. The dramatic version practically writes itself, a beloved music legend hiding a secret health battle behind a famous smile. But the version supported by actual, sourced information is a little less sensational, and in some ways more reassuring, a genuinely scary moment on stage, a precautionary hospital stay, a short pause in the schedule, and a return to performing in less than a week. That does not mean there is nothing more to the story. Richie is 77 years old, performing physically demanding shows night after night on a lengthy tour, and whether dehydration was the complete explanation, one factor among several, or simply the easiest thing to tell a concerned bandmate in the moment, is something that ultimately only Richie and his medical team actually know for certain. It is also worth considering why a performer in his position might choose to keep the specifics of his health private, even from fans who clearly care about his well-being. At 77, still selling out arenas and still building a career around joy, celebration, and nostalgia, there is a real incentive to control the narrative around his own health rather than let a single detailed medical statement follow him for the rest of his career. A short, grateful message that simply says he is doing well leaves far more room for Richie to keep being exactly the performer his fans want him to be, rather than becoming the center of a different kind of headline entirely. It is also worth remembering that this is not the first time an aging music legend has faced this exact kind of speculation following a sudden health scare. Audiences have watched a version of this story unfold before with other veteran performers, a frightening incident captured on video, a vague comment from someone in the artist's orbit, and then weeks of guessing before the artist speaks for themselves, if they ever fully do. Rich's situation followed that same familiar pattern almost exactly, right up until the moment he finally posted on July 4th. And even then, what he offered fans was reassurance rather than a full accounting, which is a choice plenty of performers make when they would rather not turn a private medical matter into a headline that follows them for years. None of that means fans are wrong to want more information. It simply means that, based on everything that has actually been verified, more information is not something Richie has chosen to share, and until he does, every other explanation circulating online remains just that, an explanation, not a confirmed fact. What we can say with confidence is this. Lionel Richie scared his fans, spent a night in the hospital, paused his tour for less than a week, and came back sooner than almost anyone expected, all without ever confirming the one specific detail so many people online were convinced they already knew. Whether that quiet, grateful approach feels reassuring or frustrating probably depends on how much anyone feels entitled to know about a 77-year-old man's private medical business in the first place. So here's the real question worth sitting with. Do you think Lionel Richie owes his fans a fuller explanation of what actually happened that night in Minnesota? Or is keeping the specifics of his own health private exactly the right call for him to make? Let us know what you think in the comments below.